My name is Emma, and my best friend Jess, and I decided to get an apartment together after graduating college. We found this place in Boston that was surprisingly affordable, a 2-bedroom apartment in an older building. The landlord was an older man named Mr. Warren, who seemed nice, but a little odd. When we met him to sign the lease, something strange happened. We sat down at his kitchen table, and he handed us the lease to review. As we were reading through it, he said casually, "3 people live here." Jess and I looked at each other and laughed. I told him, "No, it's just the 2 of us." He stared at us for a moment with this blank expression, then shook his head and said, Right. 2 people. My mistake." We thought it was weird, but figured he was just confused. The first few months living there were completely normal. Then one day in November, about 4 months after we'd moved in, I was going through some papers that had been left in one of the kitchen drawers. Most of it was junk mail and old receipts. But then I found an old utility bill from 2 years ago. There were 3 names on the bill. Mine, Emma Torres, Jess Mitchell, and a 3rd name that had been scratched out so heavily the paper was torn. I could barely make out a few letters. It looked like it started with a D, maybe David or Daniel. My stomach felt weird looking at it. How could my name and Jess's name be on a bill from 2 years ago? We'd only lived here for 4 months. I showed it to Jess, and she was just as confused. We decided to ask Mr. Warren about it. A few days later, I ran into Mr. Warren in the hallway. I showed him the old utility bill and asked him about the 3 names. When he looked at the paper, his face went completely pale. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at me with fear in his eyes. He asked me quietly, "Oh, so you can see him now?" I didn't understand what he meant. Mr. Warren said we needed to sit down, and he told us the story. 5 years ago, 3 college students rented our apartment, 2 girls and 1 guy named Derek. They'd been living there for about 6 months when one night, Derek didn't come home. His roommates reported him missing. The police searched everywhere but never found him. His roommates moved out immediately. Since then, 6 different people had rented that apartment, and every single one moved out within a few months. They all reported the same things: hearing footsteps in the 3rd bedroom, the one that had been Derek's, seeing shadows, finding things moved around. Mr. Warren said some tenants reported actually seeing Derek, a young man with dark hair, usually standing in doorways or sitting in the living room, always watching. The fact that my name appeared on that old utility bill meant Derek was making himself known to us. Jess and I told Mr. Warren we wanted to break our lease immediately. We started packing that same night. As I was putting things in boxes, I had to go into the 3rd bedroom to get some storage bins from the closet. When I opened the closet door, I saw him, a young man with dark hair standing in the corner of the closet, partially hidden in shadow. He was staring right at me. I screamed and slammed the door shut. We grabbed whatever we could carry and left the apartment right then. We came back the next day with my dad and brother to get the rest of our stuff. We never went into that 3rd bedroom again. We moved into a new apartment across town, and we've been there for 8 months now with no problems. But sometimes late at night, I think about Derek standing in that closet, and I wonder if he's still there in that apartment, waiting for the next person to see him. My name is Tyler, and I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago with my roommate Brandon. We'd been living together for about a year, and got along pretty well. One Thursday evening in March, Brandon came home and told me he was moving out. He said he got a new job in another state and needed to leave by the end of the week. That weekend, Brandon packed up all his stuff. I helped him carry boxes down to his car on Saturday afternoon. He shook my hand, thanked me for being a good roommate, and drove off. His room was completely empty. No furniture, no clothes, nothing. Just bare walls and carpet. The next day, Sunday morning, I woke up around 9 a.m. and heard footsteps coming from Brandon's room. Heavy footsteps walking back and forth, like someone was pacing. Then I heard his bedroom door open and footsteps walking down the hallway to the bathroom. I heard the shower turn on. I got out of bed, confused. Nobody else had keys to the apartment. I walked to the bathroom and the door was closed with water running inside. I knocked and called out Brandon's name. No response, just the sound of the shower. The door was locked from the inside. The shower kept running for about 10 minutes, then turned off. I stood there waiting for the door to open. It never did. After a few minutes of silence, I tried the handle again. This time it was unlocked. I opened the door and the bathroom was empty. Nobody there. The mirror was fogged up with steam and there were wet footprints on the bath mat, but no Brandon. I checked his bedroom. Still completely empty. I tried calling Brandon's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent him a text asking if he came back to the apartment. The next morning, the same thing happened. Footsteps in Brandon's room. The shower turning on. The bathroom door locked from the inside. This went on for 3 days straight. Every morning I'd hear him moving around, hear the shower, but never actually see him. On Wednesday, I finally got a text back from Brandon. The text said, "I moved out last week. Why are you still replying?" I stared at my phone, confused. I texted back asking what he meant. He replied, "Tyler, you've sent me like 30 messages. I moved out 8 days ago. Are you okay?" I checked my sent messages and he was right. I'd sent him dozens of texts over the past week. But I only remembered sending a few. The texts I didn't remember writing were strange. Things like, "Why won't you answer me, and I can hear you in there, and please just talk to me." I didn't write those. That night I stayed at my friend's apartment. The next day I went back with my friend to get some clothes. As we walked in, we both heard it. Footsteps coming from Brandon's empty room. My friend heard it too. We both stood there frozen as the footsteps walked across the room. Then the door opened by itself. We could hear footsteps coming down the hallway toward us. My friend grabbed my arm and we ran out of the apartment. I broke my lease and moved out that week. I couldn't stay there anymore. Brandon swears he moved out and never came back. But something was still there, going through the same routine every day, living in that empty room like it never left. I live with my girlfriend now in a different part of the city, but sometimes I still get text messages from my old number, the apartment's landline that I canceled months ago. The messages are always the same. "Why did you leave?" I never respond. My name is Chris, and I moved to Seattle for a new job. I found a roommate on a housing app named Kevin. He seemed normal enough, and the rent was affordable. When I first walked into the apartment, something immediately felt off. We were going to be 2 roommates, but when Kevin showed me the bedroom, there were 3 beds. 2 normal twin beds on either side of the room, and then a third bed pushed against the far wall under the window. I asked Kevin why there were 3 beds if it was just the 2 of us. He looked at me with this completely serious expression and said, "That one's yours when you sleepwalk." I laughed and told him I don't sleepwalk. I never have in my entire life. Kevin didn't laugh back. He just said, "Okay, but the bed stays there just in case." I thought it was weird, but I needed a place to stay, so I moved in. The first few weeks were normal. Then one morning, about a month later, I woke up and Kevin was sitting on his bed staring at me. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept well. He told me we needed to talk. Kevin pulled out his phone and said he'd been having trouble sleeping because of noises at night, so he set up his phone to record while we slept. He turned his phone toward me and pressed play. The video was dark, shot from Kevin's nightstand. I could see him sleeping and my empty bed on the other side. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. Then I saw movement. Someone stood up from my bed. It was me. I watched myself get out of bed and just stand there completely still. Then I started walking slowly across the room toward Kevin's bed. I stood right next to where he was sleeping, looking down at him. I just stood there, staring at him. I stood there for almost 3 minutes. Then I turned around and walked back to my bed. I felt sick watching it. Kevin showed me another video from the night before. Same thing. He had 5 videos from the past 5 nights, all showing me doing the same thing. Kevin said that's why there's a 3rd bed. The previous roommate did the same thing. He would get up every night and stand over Kevin's bed. When Kevin confronted him, the guy had no memory of it, so they set up a 3rd bed, hoping it would help. It didn't work, and the guy moved out. I had no memory of getting up at night. Kevin said we needed to figure this out because he couldn't sleep knowing I was standing over him every night. I agreed to try sleeping in the 3rd bed. That night, I went to bed in the 3rd bed under the window. The next morning, Kevin showed me the video. At exactly 2:47 a.m., I got up from the 3rd bed, walked across the room, and stood over Kevin's bed again. Same thing. It didn't matter which bed I slept in. I decided to set up my own phone to record myself. That night, I placed it on my nightstand facing my bed. The next morning, I checked the video. It showed me sleeping normally until 2:47 a.m. Then I sat up in bed. But the way I moved wasn't natural. It was too stiff, too mechanical. I got out of bed, and before I got to Kevin's side, I turned and looked directly at my phone, directly at the camera. My eyes were open, but they looked empty. I stared at the camera for about 10 seconds, then continued to Kevin's bed. After standing over him for 3 minutes, I walked back. Before I laid down, I looked at the camera again and smiled. It wasn't my smile. I moved out the next day. Kevin understood. But the same thing kept happening in my new apartment. I'd wake up in different places, standing in my kitchen, standing in my bathroom, always at 2:47 a.m. I went to doctors and sleep specialists, but they found nothing wrong. It's been 6 months now, and it still happens every single night. I live alone, so I'm not scaring anyone else. But sometimes I wonder what I'm really doing during those few minutes at 2:47 a.m. Sometimes I wonder if it's even me at all.